Really happy to be joined to help us sort through all this and explain what's going on by Kevin Gosztola, who many of you may know is the managing editor of shadowproof.com, and believe it or not, is the co-host of the podcast Unauthorized Disclosure. Very good podcast, I have to say, co-hosted by Rania Khalek. Kevin, thanks so much for being back with us.
Hey, it's good to talk to both of you.
So I guess just walk us through this story, maybe in a capsule view. I mean, I've heard about this story from your reporting about it, of the Yahoo story. I don't even really fully know how to summarize it because it's so out there.
So let's just, I'll go through the framework of what we knew before and what we learned, and then what the implications are for Julian Assange's appeal. So we knew before this reporting that there was an espionage operation against the Ecuador embassy, and that a private security firm in Spain called UC Global was involved, that they contracted and that they were working for US intelligence. But I'll just note that most of the time people said US intelligence because we had not fully confirmed that it was the CIA, despite our pretty good suspicions. And then there was also a report done that exposed that there was cover provided to this operation by Las Vegas Sands, and that you could connect it back to Sheldon Adelson, who was the Republican billionaire. He's now dead, but he had been bankrolling President Donald Trump and a lot of Republicans. And he was involved in also helping the CIA, providing assistance. And so now in this report, what we get from these Yahoo News reporters, including Michael Isikoff, who is a prominent reporter, is this detailed analysis and a lot of sourcing from over 30 former Trump administration officials and former intelligence officials who describe what was going on during Trump's administration, where you had people within the CIA discussing ways to redefine Wikileaks so that they weren't treated as a media organization, ways to go after and disrupt the journalism of Wikileaks, target its staff members, steal electronic devices, pit people against each other, plant false or damaging information. And we have discussions around a rendition operation, kidnapping Julian Assange from the embassy, putting him on a plane back to the United States, or I suppose he could have gone to a third country for some secret interrogation. Then there's also the fact that we have evidence, according to these sources, that there were plans sketched out within the CIA to assassinate Julian Assange, and that there was serious contemplation of what legal authority they may have had to carry out all of these operations. And it frightened the Justice Department, and the Justice Department decided that they were going to accelerate their agenda of bringing Julian Assange to trial. And they were going to indict Julian Assange. So what does this mean for the appeal? This means that there's evidence of improper pressure on the Justice Department to charge Julian Assange. That's a big deal because in the decision from Judge Vanessa Baretzer at the district court level, although she rejected the extradition request on different grounds, she did say, I do not believe that the hostility from within the CIA would translate to improper political pressure on the Justice Department to charge Julian Assange. But these sources contradict that entirely. The other thing is that the appeal hearing that's upcoming on October 27th, which I'll be covering, is going to be one where it discusses where the U.S. makes a claim before this appeals court that they would treat Julian Assange humanely if he was brought to the United States. And they're going to need to undermine the conclusion of Judge Vanessa Baretzer that extradition would be oppressive for mental and physical health reasons. Well, the suspicion is that they would place him under special administrative measures within the mass incarceration system of the United States, and that this would be a designation that came from the Attorney General. So that'd be Attorney General Merrick Garland. And who pressures Merrick Garland to do this? It's people within intelligence agencies like the CIA, which we now see from this report is completely hostile. We already knew that, but we have more evidence than ever that they are hostile and will go so far as to plot to kill Julian Assange.
Kevin, I'm curious of, well, two things. First, I think what's really alarming, everything about this report is alarming, but what's very alarming is this kind of way that the CIA under Mike Pompeo went about categorizing WikiLeaks as like a non-state intelligence agency that was maybe working for foreign powers. But regardless, that sounds like a new designation that they sort of like pulled out of their asses, if I may say. So can you talk a little bit about the dangers in that designation? Because it basically allowed them to open up this publishing organization, this journalistic organization, to all kinds of things that you're then allowed to do to a spy agency, including the kidnapping, assassination, torture, whatever. So can you speak to that? And then also, will this have any impact, do you believe, on the case in the UK to extradite Assange to the United States?
Yeah. So if you go back to 2017 in April, the first public remarks that CIA Director Mike Pompeo gave was at a Washington, D.C. think tank called CSIS, and he signaled to us all that there was going to be a major escalation in the war on WikiLeaks because they were designating WikiLeaks a non-state hostile intelligence agency. And right then, I put together a narrative. I didn't have the facts. I didn't have the evidence that comes from the sources for this Yahoo News report. But I could tell that there was something that had led to this. And it was because of the publication of the Vault 7 materials that WikiLeaks put out, which were not the hacking tools themselves, but they exposed offensive cyber warfare operations by the CIA. And as we see in this article, Mike Pompeo was embarrassed. They were ashamed. Everyone decided they needed to have revenge on Julian Assange. So he signals that they're going to go after him. And as this article states, they wanted to prove that WikiLeaks was working on behalf of the Russian government, but they had no evidence. So in order to justify the aggressive operations they wanted to carry out, they went a different route, which was to say they're a hostile entity. And this is something that people should spend some time thinking about. It's really alarming. I think press freedom organizations should be terribly concerned. And we did see at least a half dozen or so come out with some strong statements renewing their demands on the Biden administration to drop these charges. But not only are we talking about redefining the organization away from being a journalist organization to a hostile entity, but it's also saying things like, and we actually knew this from a New York Times report that came out in November 2018, but this just gives us some more definitive information. And this is that they were going to try and redefine people as information brokers. People like Julian Assange would be treated as information brokers. And they even talked about doing this to high-profile journalists like Glenn Greenwald and Laura Poitras after they did their reporting on Edward Snowden's documents. So they wanted a way to go after all journalists that are publishing what they consider to be state secrets. And this is something that, again, this is why we say all along, this isn't just about Julian Assange. I mean, in some cases, I think that can be a kind of a cop-out for you to not show solidarity with Julian Assange. But depending on where you're actually coming from when you make that statement, I think it's also a fair thing to put out there that this really isn't just about one single individual. This is about creating a model for going after national security journalism and being able to suppress it and ensure that what we really have is just state-identified journalism that is in the control of the national security state, that they are only going to work with reporters and only ever have to bother with people who they feel will listen to them and only print what they're willing to allow. And so that's the problem with WikiLeaks, is that they don't answer to the US government. They're just going to publish it all. They're going to publish any document because they have reasons to believe that those documents are in the public interest and that they should not have to answer to certain officials in making their determinations about what we get to see. And what it means for the appeal hearing is that their legal team can go before the appeals court and argue to the High Court of Justice that this proves that you cannot trust the United States government to take care of Julian Assange in their custody. Because if people at the highest levels of government were plotting to kill Assange or kidnap him from the Ecuador embassy when he had political asylum, it basically proves his allegations. It proves all of his claims, everything he ever said when he set foot in the embassy back in 2012. This shows that he had legitimate fear of his safety and that he had good grounds to seek asylum. And so he should not be extradited to the United States.
I mean, it really is, amazing the levels that they're willing to go through, the just complete disregarding really of any, well, obviously CIA, so morals, we all knew that was out the door, but just even a fig leaf of legality in every possible way. Well, it'll be interesting to see how this all turns out in a lot of different ways. I think that it'll be very notable to see how it ends up impacting on the trial itself, the extradition hearing. As you said, Kevin, you will be there covering the extradition hearing. Where can people follow you so they can be following as closely as they can all of the updates?
It's gonna, if you go to thedissenter.org or if you go to shadowproof.com, you'll be able to follow my reporting. If you both wouldn't mind, I'd just like to get in here in 30 seconds that Mike Pompeo has actually called for the 30 plus sources who spoke to the Yahoo News reporters to be prosecuted. I just wanted to make sure that that made it into our coverage and discussion. There's larger things we can say about the CIA and what this illustrates about the last 20 years. We can do that at another time. But I just think the news piece that I want to make sure your viewers got was that Mike Pompeo isn't really denying what was reported. He's instead saying that there should be prosecutions from the Justice Department.
Wow.
Wow.
That's, well, in a way, it tells you everything you need to know. Kevin Gosztola, thank you so much for giving us some of your time here. Everyone check out shadowproof.com and keep following Kevin and this story.
Thank you.